Again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrea Cumpston, and I'm with the Enterprise Wireless Alliance. Let me tell you a little bit about the Enterprise Wireless Alliance. EWA is an FCC-certified frequency advisory committee and leading advocate for business enterprises that rely on wireless communication systems. EWA provides its members and clients with consulting services, frequency coordination, license preparation, spectrum management, and associated services. Membership in EWA is open to users of wireless communication systems, vendors, system operators, and service organizations. EWA is the developer of CEVO, a powerful online frequency coordination solution which simplifies the FCC license application process and allows users to select their own frequencies. EWA is also the creator of CEVO Go, a mobile app that delivers certified frequencies in hours, not days. More information about membership and services is available at www.enterprisewireless.org. Today's speaker is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Enterprise Wireless Alliance, Mark Crosby. Throughout his career, Mark has been an advocate for the efficient and effective use of spectrum dedicated for the use of business enterprises. Under his leadership, EWA has become recognized as a fierce defender of EWA member spectrum rights, a proponent of responsible regulatory policy, and the most trusted FCC-certified frequency advisory committee. In addition, Mark serves as Secretary-Treasurer of the Board of Directors of the Land Mobile Communications Council. And with that, Mark?
Thank you, Andrea, very much for that introduction. Thank you for everyone that's on the call. And I just want to, well, yes, I'm on the first page. I have by my side in our conference room here at EWA experts to help me along the way. I have Liz Sachs, Lucas Nace, LaFeria and Sachs. I think I got it. Law firm.
A couple of loud.
EWA is as good as it is representing our members and the industry because of Liz Sachs, and I also have with me Robin Cohen, our Vice President of Spectrum Strategies and Regulatory Affairs, and so if I miss something on a slide, I know that Liz will fill in the blanks, and Robin will kick me under the table to make sure I stay focused. So again, thank you for being on the call. I want to sort of say, listen, we're going to cover some facts, historical facts. We have observations. We have some preliminary thoughts and recommendations. And I want to say this is probably the first of several webinars that we're going to have on the repurposing the 900 band. I mean, we just got a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and let's be clear. I'm not sure everybody in the industry, probably not even within the FCC, has a clear understanding of what they wrote or how to interpret some of it, but we're going to do the best we can. These are EWA opinions and observations. Nothing's cast in concrete. Remember, we have to go through this regulatory proceeding, so we're trying to, obviously this first webinar was sort of put a fence around some of the issues as this critical spectrum rulemaking progresses. So I say that because I want to make sure we can control expectations. Anybody on the call, oh, Crosby's going to give us all the answers. No, we're going to sort of cover what we know and what's in the proposal, and then have some preliminary recommendations. And so I'm just trying to be clear. We'll do the best we can with this. So let's go to the things. We're, at the risk of being a little bit too detailed, this is the only slide I have an outline on. We're going to, obviously, to understand where we are today, we need to know where did this all come from, what's the history. Part 1. Part 2 is what did the FCC propose. And then Part 3, we have some ideas on implementing and how licensees, incumbents, or prospective broadband licensees may want to look at what the proposals are. So Part 1 is history, and this all goes back to 1985. This was, I think, the last allocation the Federal Communications Commission allocated for private land mobile. There's been a lot of allocations since, but they've been auction-based, and the eligibility was more than private land mobile. So this was the last allocation, 1985. It consisted of a 5 by 5 megahertz block, and it was two pieces. There's a piece of 200 paired 12.5 channels allocated and auctioned. Well, first it was wait a minute, I have that. That was a lottery. There was a lottery, and that was I remember that back when there was a lottery. There was people called us and said, "I won these channels in New York City. A lottery. Are these worth anything?" And I go, "Don't do anything until you talk to some experts on this." And that was sort of an interesting time because there was people that won some licenses via lottery and they didn't quite know what they had or what to do with them, but they sort of knew that they were important, and it was a good thing. And then, of course, the commission later in '95 auctioned the SMR bands, and we have a picture of this. There's 199 12.5 kilohertz channels for business, industrial, land transportation. So you will see BILT at various times through this presentation is business, industrial, land transportation, and a site-specific subject to frequency coordination. When this started, the 199 channels, commercial operations, SMRs, private carriers, be however you want to call them, were excluded from the frequency coordination securing BIL to the 199. Now, over time, if you became that way, you could convert them, and there's a handful today of very substantial SMR operators at 900, about 6 or 7 that are operating on the BILT channels, SMR operations. Of course, over time, it's been a while, right? So 15, 20, like 30, for almost 40 years, if somebody comes to EWA and says, "I'd really want 10 900 megahertz channels in Chicago," there may be 1 or 2 that have fallen off the licenses, but pretty much in the top 40 urban areas, there is not a lot of 900 that you can secure via frequency coordination purposes. The other good news about this band clearly is that all the major vendors have over a period of time produced infrastructure and equipment at 900 megahertz. So it's not like it was reserved for one vendor or whatever. All the major vendors produced equipment, and some of it's now digital equipment for 900 systems, both SMR and BILT systems. And here's a picture of what it looked like. I like the color scheme. It looks like it's sort of interesting to look at it this way. So the geographic SMRs are you can see that there's 20 blocks, A, B, C, D, E to T, and each one has 10 contiguous channels. So 10 contiguous, you go, oh, that's a lot. Well, it's 125 kilohertz because these paired, and these channels are all 12.5 kilohertz. And the blue is the site-based SMR business industrial, and each one of these blocks has 10 contiguous 900 channels, starting from 935 to 940, and the mobile's 896 to 901. Why they decided to do that back then and split it into little pieces, all these pieces of 10 channels, I have no idea. But back in the 80s, if I remember, they sort of came to the conclusion that why would anybody need more than 10 channels? Why would anybody need more than 125 kilohertz, 10 channels? Because if you put in a trunk system with 10 channels, you could probably serve 1,200 units, and that's a lot of units. And you know, that was the way they made decisions back then. That's plenty. Well, obviously, technology keeps moving, and this picture no longer fits the technology and some of the advances in digital technology, and obviously it doesn't accommodate broadband. But that's what they knew back in 1985, and everybody said we're good. I mean, who would need more than this? But we know that's not the case. So and here's a little. So what's happened? So between 1985 and the spectrum being licensed to 2014, don't forget that the SMR piece was Sprint's for a long time. because they won Nextel. And then Sprint won a lot of the SMR things at auction. They used it for to support their iDEN system. They used it for green space, for rebanding. But, you know, prior to 2014, Sprint shut down the iDEN system. They didn't need the 900 channels for green space, and there it was sitting there. So a lot of people have said, how did PDV end up with this spectrum? And I always say, well, they're the ones that stepped up and raised $100 million and went and bought it. And when I give speeches across the country on this, I sort of want to put into the, well, how did they end up with it? I said, well, they had the initiative to go raise $100 million and buy it. I don't think Sprint particularly cared who they sold it to, but anybody could have raised $100 million, gone knocked on. We would have been able to tell you who to talk to at Sprint too, because we know who makes those kind of decisions. And we go, if you got the check, they'll probably let you have it. But PDV did that, and in the early days, I guess it was Pacific Data Vision, now PDV Wireless. They did the deal, and so in 2014, they bought Sprint's licenses, and they not only bought the SMR. Sprint also had some of the BILT licenses, which they needed for expansion in, rebanding at 800, and for some other areas of the country where they needed extra capacity for their iDEN network. And people go, well, how did they do that? Well, no one else was using it. I mean, a lot of people go, what? There's a lot of parts of the country they bought it. You're right. And so it's sort of like they've done everything the way you would expect an innovative company to do. They did their research, and they bought the spectrum, and they bought the SMR spectrum, they bought the commercial spectrum, and they have it. So one of the first things that happened, and if I remember, this was like February of 2014, there was a letter. We met with the commission, and I remember there was like 3 associations, and we said it might be a good idea, maybe we can reorganize this band to create a broadband option for business, industrial, and critical infrastructure people. And it started that way, and then it migrated in. We prepared a petition for rulemaking, a little bit more specific. But remember, when you do a petition for rulemaking with the commission, you can ask for dang near anything. You know you're never going to get it all, but you got to start somewhere. And this is a perfect example. You ask for certain things, and you propose, wouldn't this be a great idea? And you have to start the process, and you file a petition for rulemaking, and that you have to burn up shoe leather at the FCC. You gotta work it. And in this case, is any petition for rulemaking perfect? Absolutely not. And I don't know how many I've done over my career, but they never come out the way we first went in. But that's just the nature of the beast. So they did a petition for rulemaking, and proposing the 3x3 broadband and a 2x2 narrowband segment. Because we know that there are people that rely on 900 for their narrowband voice and data needs. And the commission issued a public notice seeking views on the petition. And then 2015, because it took that long, people started filing comments in response to the public notice. And then things sort of, things didn't go dark, but there was a lot of discussions between 15 and 17 with PDV, with incumbents and with the FCC, and there's just a lot of conversations to educate and to inform and to gather information about the risks and rewards of doing broadband at 900. And this is a normal process, too, that people needed to do. And then the commission in 2017, I'm not so sure EWA agrees this might have been the next best step, but they did a notice of inquiry. And a notice of inquiry sort of tells everybody the commission doesn't quite know what to put in a notice of proposed rulemaking, so they gather information and they issue a notice of inquiry. The worst thing that could happen, you don't want a further notice of inquiry. I mean, you want to hurry up, get your questions answered so we can move on. So in 17, the whole year, we got this NOI, more conversations, and people respond to the NOI. Then the first sign that we know there's been some movement is in 2018 when the FCC issues a public notice saying, we're freezing all site-based BILT applications. because that's a sign that something's coming, and they don't want the spectrum environment corrupted. If they know they're going to do a repurposing, they don't want it corrupted by people that go, ooh, let me get some licenses, and Minot, North Dakota, and where places like that, and they sort of corrupt the environment, and it's not good to have speculators come in before you try to do something substantial for the benefit of the industry. In EWA's perspective, the benefit for the industry, and remember we represent business, industrial, land transportation licensees and SMRs, to have an opportunity to have those licensees, our members, to have the ability to have access to a broadband network that serves their interests as opposed to, say, consumer-based interests or public safety interests is a good thing. So this is good. So they implement the freeze. That signals everybody there's going to be something profound coming from the FCC. And the only thing that we did is freezes have, it's good because they keep the, lack of a better term at this point, the riffraff out, but it can harm at times some incumbents that were working on things and they're caught off guard a little bit by the freeze. And obviously these aren't speculators, these are legitimate licensees that rely on their systems. And so both EWA and UTC, for those of you who don't know, Utilities Telecom Council, we said, Commission, can you clarify the freeze so that it isn't particularly as onerous on some incumbents, and they haven't responded to that as yet. Will they? Unlikely, because that's the Commission. 2019, Commission finally figures out they have all their answers, although they Notice of Proposed Rulemaking they issued this year in March has questions too. There was some confusion when they were supposed to be filing comments, but we got that all sorted out. The first set of comments is due on June 3rd, and the next set of reply comments, and of course reply comments are where everybody gets to comment on everybody else's comments, or people that don't file in the first set of comments because they weren't ready. Then when they read what everybody filed, their vision of what they want to file becomes a little clearer, and they weigh in on the reply comments. But this is the way things work, and there's the history of this 900 proceeding. See, do I have any questions? No. Okay, Liz, did I miss anything?
Yep.
Okay. Part 2. So what did the Commission put in its Notice of Proposed Rulemaking? Again, there are experts in regulatory rulemaking things that have read the NPRM maybe a dozen times, and they still end up scratching their head. What is the Commission actually proposing? So I'm going to repeat again. This is a summary. This is how we're looking at it. EWA, its observations. Other people may have different opinions. This is our observations of the proposal. And it doesn't matter right now what we think anyway, all that observation, because you still have to have comments filed, and the Commission's eventually going to put out more information that might change other people's views. So what the proposal is, if you remember the first picture and all the green and, the blue and the gold stripes, we're going to split the 5x5 into actually 3 pieces, but two. In the middle is the 3x3 for broadband, private enterprise broadband. We split the narrowband. The proposal, the way it came out, is we split the narrowband into 2 pieces. 120 channels on the lower end, 39 channels on the upper end, and this was all done for a variety of reasons, but let's just say that splitting it that way is a bigger benefit than putting it all together for a variety of reasons. Technical reasons, incumbents, adjacent band incumbents, all kinds of things. This is, you could look at this, anybody on the phone call could probably come up with 30 other ways to do this. And this may change. We don't know at this point, because people are going to file comments. Why isn't it 41 channels instead of 39? Or why is it 3? All of these are legitimate arguments, but the proposal at this point is 2 pieces for narrowband and 1 3x3 contiguous, it needs to be contiguous, for the broadband piece in the middle of the band. Looking to make sure there's any questions. No questions. So essentially what I just said, you're going to reconfigure the band to create an opportunity for broadband for business, industrial, and critical infrastructure. And, you know, here's my little play. You cannot convince me that the big national carriers who dedicate their systems and their investments and things for consumer-based type of activities are going to, are really considering what a business, industrial, land transportation, or critical infrastructure, power, petroleum, railroads, what they may need. I mean, it probably doesn't even enter their discussions when they're in their big conference rooms talking about who we're going to go serve. I almost guarantee a BILT in critical infrastructure, CII, is hard for them to spell. And so we have to take the initiative, our PDB takes the initiative, which EWA supports, to create a broadband opportunity for business, industrial, and critical infrastructure. So the broadband piece, those of you that are Spectrum experts, 897.5 to 936, we have the pieces laid out, and the Commission in its Notice of Proposed Rulemaking said that we're going to put this broadband thing under Part 27 under miscellaneous wireless communications services. I was lamenting when we were going over these notes with Liz, why do we have to be called miscellaneous? I don't want to be called miscellaneous. I want us to be called business, industrial, critical infrastructure, broadband service. And Liz reminded me that, well, we could still do that, but the general classification of this type of service is going to fall under Part 27 miscellaneous. But do keep in mind, I don't want to be called miscellaneous. Make a note of that, Liz, with you.
Got
Okay, there you
go.
Okay. So, you know, the Commission is asking a lot of questions in the NPRM, and one of them is alternate approaches. So we could do a 3x3, we can do a 5x5, we can do, so they're just asking the question. If somebody were to put in the chat room, so what do you want, EWA? I'm sort of going, can we just start with the 3x3, which is going to be a significant enough step forward. It accommodates the narrow bands, it accommodates the broadband. It's a good start. If, I don't know, I'll pick a date. 30 years from now, technology advances so that you can do all kinds of sophisticated overlay and keeping track of who's using what. You might be able to get to a 5x5. But at this point, I think EWA's opinion is, let's start with a 3x3. I think we can accommodate that. Let's do that. But the Commission asked the question. So it opens up. There could be, a lot of people may answer this in different ways, and we'll see how it comes out and how people file. So this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky, because they're going, okay, so how do we transition the band from the 40 pieces of 10 into 3 pieces, 2 narrow bands and 1 broadband? How do we make that happen? And so there's all kinds of approaches that they put in here. We're going to cover them, and this is where it gets a little tricky, so bear with me. So there's the thing, do we have voluntary relocation? Should we have mandatory relocation? So that's sort of tied to holdouts, right? There's always, you could have, say they do the geographic area and they do counties, and there's, I don't know, we'll pick a number, and there's 80 people in there, and 75 of them go, I'm all in. I want to be a part of the broadband, and I still want my narrowband, but there's 5 guys in the way. What do you do with the 5 guys? You have to, that don't want to talk to you, don't want to play, and you have to figure out how, you can't have 5 guys holding up 75. So the Commission's handled this many, many, many times before, but in this particular case, we have to flush it out and have comments and dialogue with the Commission how to address holdouts. They're still trying to figure out the geographic size of the broadband licenses, but I think it's going to be county. I don't know, people can argue, why does it have to be county? Well, because there's little counties, big counties. Broadband sort of fits counties, I think, and we're not advocating a nationwide new broadband competitor to AT&T and Verizon. This is not that. So county size is probably works, but we'll see what everybody has to say. Could be zip code things or something that's too small, but I don't know. We'll see. And we have to adopt rules so that if somebody is an incumbent, we have limits on replacement spectrum. They go, I got 5 channels, but for me to go, I want 10. We go, wait a minute. You can't capitalize on this. If you got 5, you can't ask for 10. Well, I might need 10 because I had to move 3 channels away. Who knows? So that's a discussion that we have to get into too. And the Commission sort of suggesting 1 for 1, but the discussion on limits of replacement spectrum is a part of this NPRM. And obviously we need to come up with, what does comparable mean? I have a system, no one's on it. I have 8 channels. I have these channels. My band channelization plan is this, and I want the same thing. Okay, so we might be able to come up with a definition of what comparable facilities means, but it's been a well-worn path towards this definition, and I don't think the Commission at this point in time is going to try to create a new one, because the one they've used in the past and all the rebandings, I don't know how many rebandings there's been, but more than a handful, they have a definition of what's comparable. All right, so this is why I may need Liz to weigh in, because this is where it gets a little tricky. So how do you go from point A to point B? How do you repurpose from the 40 slots to the slots? So the first one I sort of like, EWA likes, is why don't we start out with an approach where there's voluntary discussions on how to get to the repurpose, so that whoever the party being who's negotiating might be PDB or might be somebody else who has enough spectrum to be the broadband licensee at this point. They have a voluntary discussion with incumbents, and voluntary, is what it is. You don't have to talk to the broadband person, but it's probably in your best interest to have conversations, because I always tell people, or we tell people, there's no harm, no foul talking with anybody. You haven't signed anything. Nothing's cast in concrete. There's no harm in talking to the prospective broadband licensee on what your requirements are today, next year, 3 years down the road. There's no harm. In matter of fact, it's probably a good thing. So, and parties can negotiate what they want. Doesn't mean you get them, but you can ask for them. But somehow a voluntary eventually, hopefully, you arrive at a decision where everybody's sort of happy because, yeah, I live with that, and the broadband licensee goes, yeah, that seems to be fair, and guess what? It's in compliance with FCC rules, so the commission won't change the terms. But there's still something. Incumbents cannot receive more channels than they hold, 1-for-1 exchange, unless additional spectrum is required. If you have to change some of your channels, sometimes you might need other sites and whatever. But all that's part of the voluntary negotiation. But the commission is watching. And to implement this, remember that freeze I mentioned about 3 or 4 slides back. If you need extra capacity in BILT, the commission will lift the freeze so that you can do the licensing to get access to those channels. So that's a voluntary exchange. This is where it starts to get a little tricky and where great minds may have different opinions on how this works. So after the voluntary, I had really good notes on this. So eventually, after the voluntary or during the thing, the commission is going to issue a public notice and go, all right, you got 1 year or something like this to work out your voluntary negotiations. And there may be in the public notice, we want 90% of the incumbents to come to some sort of conclusion. If we don't get to 90%, there'll be a second year where there's voluntary, again, maybe voluntary or mandatory discussions, and there's another threshold. In other words, you can't have voluntary discussions for years. There has to be a limit, because the objective is to create a broadband opportunity for business, industrial, and CII interests. So you can't have, well, let's keep talking until 2030. There has to be deadlines. The commission will do public notices providing deadlines, and there'll be percentages of the counties that'll trigger mandatory discussions and mandatory obligations to relocate. Did I miss anything in that?
No, I mean, the theory is, as Mark said, almost all band repurposings have started with some sort of voluntary negotiations. I mean, that's always the best way to start, and you see how far you can get. But the commission, even though it very much favors voluntary, recognizes you could always have a holdout. I mean, you could have one guy with one channel at a site 45 miles out of New York City that would prevent broadband from ever being deployed in our largest city. That just can't make sense. So the Commission has recognized that they're going to have to come up with some sort of backstop that says, if you get to this point, now we have to have a process that requires people to move. One of the options is the success threshold. Another option is overlay auctions, and we're all familiar with those. And you could have, an overlay auction if people don't meet the success thresholds, assuming the Commission adopts that. But there has to be an end to the process at some point. Otherwise, all the Commission's language in the beginning of the NPRM about how, yes, broadband is so important and it's going to help critical infrastructure do this and it's going to help business enterprise do that is meaningless, because there always will be a holdout.
Before I get to the overlay auction, there is, on the mandatory, I think we discussed earlier that there's a proposal to carve out licensees from the mandatory if they have 64 sites or more. That's a big system, 64 sites. More than likely they're utilities, because they're usually the types of licensees that have that many sites. But, to force or you have to carve them out. It's not to say that you can't do a deal, but it's a little bit harder to do a voluntary deal with 64 sites, and so there's a carve out for licensees that have.
Yeah, that says if if they don't come to agreement with the broadband licensee and that never happens, well, then they get to continue operating as they are, and maybe broadband just doesn't happen in their geographic area.
Right.
I mean, that would be unfortunate, but if they have that significant a spectrum position, that could be the outcome.
That's not a bad proposal.
Yeah.
That's a big system.
Yeah. There aren't that many of them.
There aren't that many of them. It's like, I don't know, there's more than 5, but less than a dozen. I'll have to look. And everybody knows what an overlay auction is. There's two types. One of them is you pick a geography and there's incumbents, and you overlay, have an auction, and the auction winner wins the overlay, the geographic area. And then they have, it's obviously in their best interest, and the incumbents probably want to move. You have to move the incumbents to comparable facilities and pay for relocation costs like you would under any other, like under the voluntary negotiations. And although this one seems, when you read the item, it doesn't appear that if you need to, you don't have to stay with the one-for-one channel exchange. It's not quite clear, but we'll find out. And of course, if there is no comparable spectrum, and there's no hope of providing comparable facilities and capacity, you can't relocate the incumbent. The incumbent stays, and the winning bidder in the overlay auction has to protect that operation indefinitely. I would suspect that the auction winner every now and then would knock on the door of the of the person that can't move and go, "You ready to move now? I got new things. There's new technology. We can use your spectrum for smart cars or something." Who knows? But I suspect that the overlay auction would be knocking on the incumbent's door every now and then, and it isn't clear. The Commission, I think they asked the question, the overlay auction would be 5x5 or 3x3. And by the way, this would be, you're not going to do, you win the overlay and you don't have to, you can just win that and the incumbents get to stay. Now, that's not this kind of auction. This is where, because it doesn't serve any purpose to do that. If you're going to try to get to broadband, there's an incentive for the auction winner and the incumbents to, you got to move. And there'd be time windows and thresholds as well. But there'd be a sort of a mandatory relocation if you cannot accommodate like for those that you can't accommodate. No questions yet. Good. And of course, the Commission, I'm not quite sure whether incentive auctions work in this particular space and for this purpose. The school's still out whether it worked for the broadcasters yet. When they did the incentive auction, and trust me, there were some very, 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 very smart people at the Commission who worked on the task force to do incentive auctions, and actually great people, and they did it. I guess it worked out. I'm not sure whether it works here. Well, EWA will probably hold back its support for incentive auction when we I mean, this is not a difficult process, but it's a complicated process, and the throw in option for incentive auctions tends to confuse things at this point. And I'm not so sure this is a good path. But you can't blame the commission. They, some of them are enamored with it. Hey, it worked there, it'll work everywhere. And we go, well, maybe it won't work here. So I'm not going to go through this. What's on the screen? It's something we have to watch. I may be wrong, but when comments come in, there might be a couple people go, this is the best thing since around doorknobs are doing incentive auction here. I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. AWA's approach at this time is, I'm not so sure we're a big fan yet. And I sort of like the voluntary approach, try to get that going, because there's more winners under that thing than losers. Part 3. I'm going quick. This is good. This will give us time for a lot of questions. And again, these are preliminary recommendations. These are suggestions. These are observations. They're not mandatory demands. I mean, these are just sort of thoughts that EWA had at this point if to implement the NPRM. And even though the rules aren't final, I don't think it harms any incumbent at this point to go, okay, so we got this new band plan, and it's in these pieces, and I have frequencies also at 900. I mean, this isn't difficult, but if you need help doing it, the EWA can look at it pretty quickly. You sort of go, so I have 8 channels spread from here to there, 900. Which ones of them fall in the 3x3? For all I know, there's licensees that they go, wow, all my frequencies are in the narrowband too. I don't have to be touched, and that'd be good. And there are some of those. And of course, there are others that have some in the broadband, some in the narrowband. But it might be a good idea to just look and say, how big an issue is this going to be for me? I have 3 channels, and one of them is in the broadband thing. Probably fairly easy to find out to get another channel, so that all those incumbents' worries go away, concerns are addressed. It doesn't take a lot to look. Where does my current system fall within the proposed band, and just to figure it out and say, are there replacement channels that I can look at? What's available? What would happen to my system if I had to, one of my frequencies gets, I don't know, 50 kilohertz closer to the other one? Does this have a profound impact on my antennas and my combiners? And this is, people do this every day, so it's probably not a bad idea to look at what this does to your licenses. And well, if you represent licensees, look for them. I mean, the data is in the ULS. EWA has it. I mean, this data isn't hidden anywhere. So if people can do this analysis fairly easily. And I think, though, when you're looking at this, much like, and I hate to bring this up, but like narrowbanding a long time ago, people go, oh my God, I got a narrowband from 25 analog technology that was created in 1965, and now I got to do something that was, more current. And you know what? A lot of people, when they went through this examination of their system, said, oh, I didn't know this new technology was available that I could move to. I didn't know that there were apps that I could buy to make my employees safer or my organization more efficient. I mean, so it's sort of like, not only do you want to look at what the options are for your channels, you might go and talk to your vendors and talk to the tech people you rely on. What's out there that I could add to my system if I have to move? What else is there out there that will make this beneficial for my organization, for my operations, for my efficiencies, and for the safety of my employees? And Lord knows there's a lot of very capable people out there. I didn't list them all, but who know how to help you. And I mean, obviously, you go to your vendors, because they know what they're working on, what's today, and what's maybe they're working on tomorrow, how they can integrate it with. There's all kinds of things going on right now that are very, very, very advanced, and it doesn't hurt to look. And then you can say, do something else. It's how long would it take me to do this? Might take a month, might take 6, depends on the scope of your system. But it doesn't hurt to look. How long would it take for this and what the cost might be? And I've had this too happen to me several times. People go, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to. I said, why don't you talk to somebody at PDV? They go, I can do that? I go, well, yeah. I mean, I'm happy to introduce to you very capable people at PDV. They're happy to talk to you. Even if you go, I don't want to talk to you now, I want to talk. They're very amenable to set those kind of discussions up. EWA is very amenable to have conversations with you on these type of things. And I always recommend that if you really want to see what's going on with your system and what the new products and applications and how it can integrate with LTT and LTE and all those there's tons of new stuff. Talk to your vendors, talk to your radio technicians, and potentially use this as an opportunity to upgrade your communication systems to better serve your needs. EWA likes to stir the pot. We like to be a leader and thought leader on certain and sundry things relating to spectrum. So back in April, a couple of weeks back, we filed a petition for rulemaking suggesting or having the Commission, would you please consider the possibility of allocating the guard band, 861 to 862 meg at 800, for green space for 900 incumbents who may need capacity or channel separation to accommodate the transition from broadband at 900, and potentially for those, and this is unrelated to this topic, to this webinar today, for those that may be at T-band 470 to 512 who need green space to relocate out of that, and that for business industrial. So we filed this, and I think it's innovative. I'm sure some people at the Commission might have said, "Oh my, look what the EWA filed, and now we got to address this," and some other people. But you know, I didn't get anybody calling me from the industry saying, "What a horrible idea." I got questions about, would this be mandatory? And I go, nothing's mandatory yet. However, if the Commission were to even consider this for a little bit, there are 80 12.5 kilohertz channels potentially available in guard band. Most equipment today that people are using that are digital and other things is dual band, 800, 900. It's not like, oh, I need an all new system to do 800. No, a lot of the equipment now is compatible 800 and 900. And so I just did a little simple formula here. Post repurposing 900, we used to have 199 channels, but to get to the broadband, you have to take some from the narrowband, and you end up with 160. And a lot of people go, well, that's not enough. And it may not be in certain cases. Who knows until you dig in and look at it. But if you were to create this green space in the guard band, you have 80 new channels that are potentially available in certain parts of the country to accommodate the repurposing and the at 900, and my math says 160 plus 80 is 240. And you know what? That's more than you had when you started at 900 when you had 199. I think it's a good idea. It's almost our job now is to convince the FCC that it's a good idea. But no one, the other sort of elegant about this is we don't anticipate any issues from the public safety community, which is always a good thing because they don't care about the guard band. And, you know, and other people have said, well, Mark, you're right next to the cellular people. I go, well, they're not there. And business industrial tend to do really robust systems. And, yeah, there may be, but what do you can at least look at it. It's an option. And because one of the questions I got, will you have to mandatorily move to the guard band? I go, of course not. It's a green space in case you need it. So I like the idea. We filed a petition for rulemaking. The board of directors, EWA's board of directors, overwhelmingly supported the petition. In fact, I didn't get one negative vote. It's a good thing. And so that's out there. And So here's some implementation strategies. I'll go for another couple minutes to leave us like 10 minutes for questions. Post the R&Os, for most of you are familiar with this, was a report and order, and the Commission adopts a report and order. Well, this is not that hard. This is an implementation strategy. You retune your narrowband system as needed, because as I said a couple slides ago, you already know what you got to retune because you've already done the analysis, and you can try to do within the confines of the reconfigured band. And what's the onus? Well, you got frequency coordination, you got license modification requirements, and the cost of retune is paid for by the broadband licensee. So that's obviously one implementation strategy just sort of understood, I think, by everybody. The other one is if you're going through your implementation strategy, you don't have to stay at 900. You can go to 800, assuming there's capacity. You can do a mix and match. You can use some 800, do some 900, and configure it. In other words, think out of the box a little bit. You don't have to stay at 900. You can access other bands, potentially, principally 800, to address your technical requirements and capacity requirements. And so I think that needs to be factored in as well. I know a lot of people go, 900, I know I'm at 900. Well, you can sort of look up a little bit and go, oh, there's maybe capacity at 800 too. And so maybe that helps address some of the concerns. Not all. I know there's no absolutes, but people ought to consider it. And I always, EWA has a very broad constituency. We have major utilities, major petroleum, we have airlines, huge manufacturers, overnight delivery companies, and we also have SMRs, private carriers. So there's a wide range of requirements and interpretation of this Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. So I want to say that we also get suggestions and input from some of our members that go, hurry up and get this done, I want to sell, right? Which is a very easy solution, but I'm trying to say, so some people go, we have constituents and members that go, wrap this up, Mark, because I want somebody to knock on my door, and as soon as they go, I'll offer you, and they go, I'm done, right? I'm happy to sell. So, I'm just saying that's another implementation strategy. You can depart the band entirely, and that's a well-worn path too. There's license assignments, there's forms, there's asset purchase agreements, and there's a whole host of folks that are pretty good at this, including EWA, and but that's an implementation strategy. And the last one, and we're involved in some of these now. You can attempt and consider and review the possibilities of transitioning to the new band plan prior to the report and order. And we've done some of those analysis. We see what the replacement frequencies are, what you can do at 10. We're just doing it early. The complication with it, of course, is we got to freeze. And so we need the FCC's blessing to do things prior to report and order. To me, if I were the commission, I'd go, if no one benefits, no one's getting more capacity, no one's getting more geography, they ought to jump at the opportunity to help people, especially those that are trying to implement new technologies, and they'd rather do it now than later. The commission ought to bend over backwards to help those licensees. One would think that would be the case, but we're not there yet. We're working on some of those, and maybe we need to spend a little time with the commission to be reasonable, and no one's getting harmed. And actually, it's a good thing to help people, get to the transition early and to adopt new technologies. So those are 4. There's probably a whole bunch of others, but like I said when we started, we don't have all the answers today. These are observations, suggestions, and hopefully a good snapshot of where this regulatory proceeding is at this point. Those are my contact, Robin's contact. I didn't touch that. Who did that?
I did. Keep going.
Oh, you did it on purpose? Okay. And Are there any, we have like 9 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions?
Mark, what is green space?
Oh, green space is like empty space that's set aside for specific purposes. It's sort of like extra capacity or extra inventory for people to access if they need it. So Spectrum Green Space is, we would set the guard band aside for those that need access to that spectrum to accommodate their requirements at 900. Sort of reserves it.
What's the interference isolation there in the guard band?
I don't know what's the interference in the guard band.
Oh, it's in the rules.
It's in the rules?
Yeah, I mean, it defines your protection, because that was defined for 800 megahertz for rebanding. So there's a definition in the rules of what level of protection you get in the guard band.
Is it much worse than narrowband?
No, I think the upper half gets something less, and then the bottom half gets the same, I think. But you know, it's really a question of, are you going to get interference or not? And if you receive interference, it defines, you know, how your system has to operate before you can claim protection. You know, there are people in the guard band now, and there were people in the guard band before, and it hasn't been much of an issue. But that's a technical matter that you should discuss with your vendor.
And again, it's voluntary. I mean, green space isn't a mandatory relocation of the guard band. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, you go, I'm not going, and you don't go. I just like having the extra. I like having the opportunity to use that, other than for what may go to now. I mean, I think any band that we can set aside for green space would be a good thing at this point.
I think we can set aside for real live licensees who are operating systems, and that are going to need to modify those systems as a possibility.
This is Frank Dorico. I got one question for you.
Yes, Frank.
You talked about anybody that has 64 sites is kind of exempt. Does anybody have 64 sites? I mean,
yeah.
You know, I think that number should go way down from there. Make it easy for us.
You file comments to that effect?
Exactly.
Okay. There are, Frank, there's like, I don't know, I haven't looked, but there's more than 2. So they wouldn't have mentioned it if there was, you know, it's 64, and there's, I think, like 6 to 8 people that qualify.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Robin. Thank you for everybody being on the call. Thank you, Andrew. Have a great day, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you, everyone.
Take care,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Yep. Bye-bye.